I'm Sarah Maslin Nir of the New York Times, sitting in for Sam Roberts. Welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. This week, we break down the real science behind egg freezing, from hormone injections to success rates, with the New York Times health reporter, Pam Belluck. But first, New York Times public policy correspondent Emma Fitzsimmons has been covering City Hall's policy decisions affecting everyday New Yorkers. As a former City Hall bureau chief, she reported on the city's politics, housing, transit, and the growing pressure of affordability. She joins us to discuss Mayor Zohran Mamdani's efforts to lower the cost of living and what those proposals could mean for the people who call New York home. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, I want to talk a little bit about your past career and how it overlaps with your current career, because you were the City Hall bureau chief for 5 years under Adams.
I got to cover 3 mayors, Bill de Blasio, Eric Adams, and Zohran Mamdani.
Okay.
So it was a wild ride.
Yeah. So you have seen really a sea change in how policy decisions are carried out. Can you characterize what we're seeing from Mamdani in any way as it juxtaposes to those other leaders?
Yeah, Mamdani did this recent interview with the Times, and he said he was asked if you could get one thing done as mayor, what would it be? And he said childcare. And I believe him. That's really his top policy priority. So that's been a big focus for me. At the same time, he wants to tax the rich to pay for the plan. So that's also been a focus. And then I love writing about just like everyday problems and what are the solutions. Like alternate side parking is the bane of my existence. And I recently wrote about these new stickers to try to get people to move their cars. So I like looking at these ideas and like what are ways of improving the city. And that was always my favorite part of the beat, even more than the politics.
So Mamdani had a big setback this past week in his plan to tax the rich to pay for these programs. The idea of the second house tax, the pied-à-terre tax, it got stopped in the courts. Is this going to impact in a blanket way his big policy plans?
I think his team is confident that they're going to be able to proceed with it. But even bigger than that, I mean, the biggest question in my mind is, can he tax the rich in terms of their personal income taxes? He's not going to get to universal child care unless he gets billions of dollars in new taxes. So I was at an event recently with Mamdani and Hochul. One of us asked him, do you still want to tax the rich in terms of personal income taxes? And he sort of sidestepped the question because he was standing right next to Hochul, who really doesn't want to tax the rich. But I think the pied-à-terre probably will move forward, that tax, although it's caused a lot of consternation among wealthy people who have homes here. But I think it's more about how is that carried out, not whether the state has the authority to tax these people.
Got it, got it. So he has made some strides towards childcare very recently. Can you talk about this new policy and how it's going to impact regular New Yorkers' lives?
Yeah, so my younger son was in free 3K and free pre-K. So I sort of saw this policy up close and how it can change a person's life. We had free care for 2 years. That wasn't free before. Now he's expanding it for the first time to 2-year-olds. So this fall, 2,000 2-year-olds will have free daycare. This is also full day and full year. So it's really a huge financial break for families. So I wanted to speak with some of the moms who are taking advantage of this, and they were thrilled. I spoke with one mom who's an MTA bus driver. Her daughter had been staying home with her mom because she couldn't afford childcare, and now she's going to be at this high-quality program down the block. And so she was excited. And then I also spoke with some heartbroken families who didn't get a spot. There's only 2,000 and a much larger population of 2-year-olds. So next year, they'll expand it to 10,000 more seats and hope to keep growing and growing.
And those free seats for 2-year-olds, what are the first moments of this going to look like for that MTA bus driver? I mean, how is her life going to change? She can be overjoyed, but how is it going to change materially the 2,000 families' lives?
Yeah, I mean, this child care could cost $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month. So it's an immediate, financial break if you've had your kid already in daycare. And then she said it would maybe allow her to help save up for like a college savings account for her daughter. She said she was worried about the cost of housing, the cost of groceries. This just sort of gives her some relief and less pressure. She's a single mother, so she was like, it's hard to raise a child in this city right now. And so many people feel that, even, middle income, upper middle class families, the cost of childcare can cost $50,000 a year.
Not to put you on the spot with numbers, which I know aren't reporters' fortes, but what would it cost to cover all the 2-year-olds in the city? Has that been modeled out?
Yeah, I mean, so Mamdani eventually wants to cover all children from the age of 6 weeks to 5 years old, everyone kindergarten, and that could cost between $6 billion and $9 billion a year. So this is an expensive program. You have to pay good wages for the childcare workers. You have to pay for their meals. You have to pay for the facilities. It's an expensive program, but I think that he looks at what Bill de Blasio did. You know, de Blasio was the one who rolled out universal pre-kindergarten. Yep. It is his legacy. He wants this to be his legacy. And there's this feeling that only the rich can live in New York City. And I live in Inwood. This is one of the neighborhoods where the first seats are taking place. And it's like they say it's the last affordable neighborhood in Manhattan. And so even if you have like two good jobs, it's really hard to afford childcare.
Yeah. Well, speaking of unaffordability, this next policy I want to talk about are these city-owned grocery stores. So there are going to be 5 of them to start. Can we talk about what goes on in those and how plausible and how possible it is?
Yeah, so he recently announced there's going to be a 30% discount on staples like milk and cheese and meat, and there's going to be one in Harlem. So I think one of the questions is like, are people from my neighborhood going to take the subway or the bus to Harlem to shop at this store? Like, what is the demand going to be like? But if the people who live nearby, it's going to be this really, significant relief if they can go buy rice and it's 30% cheaper than it is at the C-Town down the street. And there'll be 5 locations. They'll be opening in the coming years. But there's been a lot of criticism as well from the other store owners who say, how can we compete with 30% discounts?
That's what I was thinking. If the prices are set at an artificially deflated price, how can the regular mom and pop places match that?
Yeah, Mamdani has said that the goal is, first of all, it's just 5 stores, so it's not taking over the whole industry overnight. And he said that they won't serve certain things like prepared meals like you might get at a bodega. And so he's like, the goal, and they won't sell cigarettes or lotto tickets or a lot of the things that bodegas serve. And I think, I think that he wants to try this out, and the hope is, that this could be a real option for working class families. Like, I might not take the bus to go to this grocery store, but a lot of people really need that relief, and they might. And
is it a scalable model? Is there plans for more than the just 5?
I mean, it's interesting because I think that the stores will need subsidies. They're going to need like city funding to keep these prices low. And so the question is, again, like, does the city want to pay for it? Does the state want to pay for it? But he's said all along since he was running for mayor, I want to do 5 stores as a pilot program, and then if it's successful, we could eventually have 20 stores.
I love having you on because we can talk about anything, because your job touches everything. And that's the beauty of being a reporter. And why we love it is because we get to know a lot about things that other people might read about in passing. So I want to dig into another subject, e-bikes. So this is a left turn here, but I mean, we've had a tremendous number of deaths this summer from e-bikes. They're invaluable for the delivery economy. What is Mamdani doing about this threat?
Yeah, so I started writing about this when I saw this crash in Lower Manhattan, and it was a 17-year-old who was riding an electric bike without a helmet. He fell off and he died.
You witnessed it?
No, I read about it, and my heart was broken. My kid has been asking me for an electric scooter, and I'm like, absolutely not. These devices that are high speed are really dangerous. And so I wrote an explainer about sort of what are the rules right now. And there have been more crashes, both e-bikes and e-scooters. I think a lot of people think of delivery workers, and that's one part of it, but you can also buy an electric bike on Amazon and use it to commute to work and avoid the traffic that everyone hates. And then there's City Bike, which has electric bikes. There are like companies like Lime that have electric scooters. But my takeaway really from the reporting was like, number 1, you should follow the speed limit for these devices, which is 15 miles per hour. Number 2, you should wear a helmet. My husband and I get into this debate because he rides City Bike without a helmet, and I'm like, I need you to stay alive and parent our children with me, so please wear a helmet. But he's like, I don't want to carry it across the city and carry it to the office. But I think like after reading some of these stories, if you have a helmet, you have a better chance of surviving.
I see. Wow. So has Mamdani implemented any fixes that we can expect to see? I mean, failing people being more personally responsible?
Yeah, so he has 2 main things he's pursuing. First of all is the infrastructure. He wants to make the streets safer, have more bike lanes, have more like clear lanes, bus lanes. And then second of all, he wants to stop this at the online retailers. He doesn't want Amazon to be able to sell you that e-bike. I went and looked at the listing, and you could buy one for $650 and have it shipped to my zip code, and he wants to stop that. So he put out an alert to these online retailers saying there's going to be real repercussions if you keep selling these.
These are e-bikes that can go above the speed limit and reach dangerous.
Yeah, and that are illegal. There's bikes that are legal, and then there's bikes that go much faster that are not street legal.
Got it. So now I want to move to the bane of your existence. Why, for people who don't have cars and don't understand this dance, why is alternate side parking the bane of your existence? Why does it exist? Let's get wide.
Okay, so I'm from Texas. I grew up in a lot of cars and traffic. So when I moved to New York City, I was very happy to not need a car. Then the pandemic happened, and I had 2 kids, and we got a car. And we park it on the street, and so we have to move it once a week. And it just makes no sense. You have to double park, and then the street sweeper comes by, but you're sitting in your car in the middle of the workday for like 2 hours. I spoke with the former transportation commissioner, Polly Trottenberg, and she used to do this. And I was like, is this a good use of your time as like one of the most important people in city government to be sitting in your car, like working from your laptop? So it's just this ritual that a lot of New Yorkers hate. And this city, since the pandemic, a lot of people haven't been moving their cars.
Sometimes it's twice a week, even in certain neighborhoods.
Some blocks have to move it twice a week. And the ticket is only $65, which, is a deterrent, but for a higher income family, maybe they'll say, I'll eat the ticket, and it's cheaper than paying for garage.
Well, I actually wrote a story on garages about half a year ago that New York City has, bar none, the highest priced garages in the country. And sometimes it can be more per square foot. I had people who would sleep in their cars if they couldn't find parking that day. A taxi driver or a delivery man because he couldn't afford a garage. So tickets were a cheaper alternative.
Yeah. And so people are eating the tickets instead of moving their cars, and then the streets aren't clean. So Gail Brewer, the city councilwoman from the Upper West Side, said, enough is enough. We're going to bring back the stickers of shame. These went away in 2012.
Wait, explain a sticker of shame.
It's neon green, the new ones, and you slap it on the car, and it's really hard to pull off. So if you're driving around with it on, everyone's like, hiss, hiss, you're a bad parker. You didn't move your car. You're a bad citizen. And it's meant to be a deterrent. If the $65 ticket doesn't stop you, be a good citizen, move your car. We want less rats. And so the stickers are back. And it was interesting because a lot of people in the comments were like, really excited that the stickers were back. There's this fun, idea of shaming people for not holding up their end of being a New Yorker. And then at the same time, a lot of people were mad. They were like, this is defacing my property. Someone said it's like gluing trash, to my property.
I read in one of the articles, I think it was a city councilman said, a parking ticket is a fine. This is vandalism on private property.
Yes. And it was interesting because Mamdani actually didn't sign the bill. It was passed by the city council. He didn't sign it, but it passed into law. He could have vetoed it. So I asked him about this at a press conference, and he said, the street cleaners need to be able to do their job. So he hasn't sort of embraced this like he has some other initiatives. But Gail Brewer said people in her neighborhood are livid and that most cars don't move. And so the street cleaner just comes down the street, not cleaning anything.
Yeah.
And so maybe this could work. At the same time, they're also reducing, some blocks that have twice a week, they have to move their cars twice a week.
I saw there was a pilot program happening. So that we have the carrot and we have the stick option. The carrot being you don't have to move your car as often, so hopefully you do it that one time we ask, and the stick being a big green sticker.
Yes.
Same. Carrot and sticker.
Yes. And I did a broader piece about how to fix parking in New York City because I think everyone agrees that it's sort of a not very functional system. And one idea is residential permits, that you could park in your neighborhood if you had a residential sticker. And so that we would prioritize local residents because, you get home on a Sunday night from a trip and it takes an hour to find a parking spot.
Well, we've had some people on this show who actually have a totally different thought, which is that why should a public good that all taxpayers pay for, which is the street, be used to store private vehicles or private property? So there's also some people who feel that parking in general in the city is dysregulated because of that type of inequity. So I think there's lots of conversations to have around parking. I did think that there was a really funny part of this sticker of shame is that they come with not only shame, this car was not moved from a spot to tell you, but also instructions on how to get that goo off your windshield, which is warm water and a scraper. So it's a real effort.
Yes. And one of my favorite ideas, actually, in terms of fixing the parking system, like, you want someone like me to get rid of their car. Like, I don't want to own a car. I hate moving my car, but I need it sometimes for short trips. So one idea is like a city bike for cars, for a rental, like Zipcar, except more omnipresent and lower rates. And so you can make it a real option. Like, if I wanted to visit my parents in the suburbs, I could take a Zipcar instead of having to own a car.
When I was the temporary bureau chief in Germany, that exists everywhere in Berlin. I mean, that's how people got their groceries, is they would just jump in one of the cars that were parked in front of their house, zip it over and zip it back. And it's a ubiquitous program in Europe and actually saves a tremendous amount on gas mileage because people aren't having to bring cars to an endpoint or anything as well.
And you have to pair it with making the transit system better. If people aren't going to have cars, they need to make sure that the buses are fast and the subway is reliable.
So in the last few minutes we have, a few seconds we have, what is Mamdani's big push next?
Well, free buses have not happened. My 8-year-old keeps saying one of the buses is going to be free. He's been mayor for 7 months, 8 months, and they still cost $3. But a lot of people don't pay the fares. But I think that is the one campaign promise that's going to be the most difficult to deliver on because he doesn't control the MTA.
Got it. Well, thank you so much. I'll look forward to having you back, and we can discuss what he got done, what didn't get done, and what's next.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Coming up, what you need to know about egg freezing with New York Times reporter Pam Belluck. This past weekend, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, announced she's freezing her eggs, sharing her experience in Instagram videos, and saying she hopes to normalize the conversation for working women.
Day one of freezing my eggs, I'm diving into the process, and now I've got, let's see, all of this medicine here.
Today, we're looking at the science behind egg freezing with Pam Belluck, a health and science reporter for the New York Times. Pam, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So the way we were thinking of this is if you could help us get up to date with the latest in egg freezing, where is it now, the science, the climate? Obviously, AOC is a part of this conversation, bringing it into the mainstream even further than it has been. But where are we in this science?
Yeah, well, I mean, egg freezing is becoming more and more popular. Probably about 40,000 women a year in, I think, the most recent year's data that's available are doing it. AOC is right in the age range where many women choose to do it. She's 36, and I think the average age now is about 35. And basically, we've had sort of a growth in this since 2012, when this process was sort of removed from being considered experimental. And so that not only gave people more confidence, more clinics started to do it, but also it allowed insurance to cover it, although a lot of times it's still not covered. And then there was kind of another big milestone a couple years later in 2014 when Apple and Facebook announced that they were going to be covering egg freezing for their employees. So they sort of brought it into the mainstream.
And I think about 2 years ago, our employer started covering it too, which is fascinating.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So better late than never, I guess. So there's growing interest in it. One thing that's kind of interesting is, though, that a relatively small percentage of women have actually gone back to use the eggs.
Okay.
And go through the full IVF process. It's partly because I guess there hasn't been enough time, and the early numbers were relatively small. But the latest data that I saw is that fewer than 10% of eggs that have been frozen have actually been used in the process. So
Wow.
it's why is that? Some women go on to have children without needing this. Others decide not to use it. There's a lot of variability, but it's still something that isn't widely used, even though more and more women are doing it. the other thing that's kind of interesting is that, and I think, experts will repeatedly point this out, this is not a guarantee of that, you're going to, be able to produce a child at the end of this. This is a step that gives you maybe a little extra insurance if you are worried about your biological clock running out. But, if you are 35 or younger is better. Success rate is better the younger you are when you have your eggs frozen, and the younger you are when you choose to use them. And if you're 35 or younger, there's about a 50% chance of having a live baby at the end of the IVF process. If you're 40 or over, that success rate drops to about 20%.
And I've read in our own paper a lot of countervailing thought about these pop-up egg freezing clinics, that it can be a bit of a racket selling a false promise or false security to women. Can we talk about that, this industry that's emerged?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, social media, has unleashed, there's a tremendous amount of advertising targeted toward women to do this. And as with, I think everything else in this space, in this fertility space and reproductive health space, your best bet is to go to a reputable fertility clinic, and you need to ask about, their success rates. And you want a place that has been doing this for a long time. Want to know what their what their success rate is for a certain woman's age at when she's gotten her eggs frozen.
And that success rate is variable clinic to clinic.
It can vary clinic to
clinic. Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. There's some variability in how well-equipped and experienced clinics are at retrieving eggs and retrieving viable eggs. So that there's a little bit of there's increasing kind of automation in this process. And experience in this process, but there's still a lot of variability. And of course, the older you are when you decide to use them, then you kind of run the risks of any woman having an older age pregnancy. So that doesn't go away just because you're using eggs that you may have frozen 10 years ago.
Oh, very interesting. So one of the new developments here is a study that I read with quite a bit of interest on retrieving these eggs. Can you talk to us about some new findings in that space?
Yeah, this was really interesting. And it also, surprised a lot of people in the field, which is, I always love things like that, So, there's a sort of conventional method when eggs are retrieved, and during that process, usually what they do is you have an embryologist, they use a high-powered microscope, they're searching the follicular fluid that is extracted from the patient in the fertility clinic. And they're using a microscope to search, right? And they're looking for, tiny eggs, and what they don't see with their eye through the microscope is then discarded.
Wow. Okay, so it's a human process.
It's a human process. I mean, it's aided by a microscope, but it's the human eye that is, searching, and that's where you can have variability because some embryologists are more experienced. They may have more time in some clinics. They may have less time in other clinics, and so what has been learned is that a surprising percentage of eggs are in that discarded fluid.
Wow.
They're just missed, right? They're hidden in sort of like these cumulus clouds of fluid. And so the study that I wrote about earlier this year is a sort of new device that takes that discarded fluid after it's already been searched, right, by the microscopic way, and it runs it through, it's kind of like a pinball machine, like lots of flippers and lanes and bumpers. And in doing that, that allows, it sort of removes some of the, fluid that's kind of concealing the eggs, and more eggs, show up.
Wow.
So that is a potentially significant advance. Of course, you want to have, the number one, step in a recipe for success for IVF is more eggs.
And I think I read in the study, in your article, that 50% of the cases they found another egg, like an astounding number. And the implications for that, especially with people spending thousands on many rounds, which their insurance might not cover, could be very interesting.
Exactly, because then you might not need to go a second round or a third round, right?
Yeah.
And so, this is still kind of in the experimental stage, but there was a lot of excitement about it. It was a good study, and I was able to talk to a couple who conceived and had a healthy baby this way.
So I want to move on in our last few minutes to the social impact of AOC's announcement and what you think that will do for the industry. I mean, egg freezing can cost $10,000, $15,000 per cycle. It's not everybody has that coverage. In one way, you could be inspired by AOC. In another way, you could feel left out because she has great Capitol Hill healthcare coverage. So what do we think her chronicling this, especially online, in public, this journey is going to do for the industry and for women?
Well, in our current environment, and especially I think with a figure like AOC, there's political polarization, and that's going to factor in here, of course. She's already getting, both online criticism and praise. But if we can sort of step back a little bit from that, I think that it will raise the profile of this option for people. I think that for some women, this is really an important option to be able to have. People who do this are either often they haven't found the right partner. They know that they want to have children eventually, but they haven't found the right partner to do it with. Or as with AOC, they have a lot of other things going on.
Yep.
Sometimes there can be medical reasons or medical concerns to freeze eggs. So I think it will have a positive effect in that sense of making more people aware of the option. And I guess it might pressure more employers and more insurers to cover it. She did say she was paying for it out of pocket. But these kinds of things do tend to have a little bit of a social snowball effect.
And I think there's the flip side, the conservative view that she is falsely promising young women that it will be okay if they delay marriage and family, which I think is a conservative thread in the other direction.
Right. Of course, this comes smack in the middle of the, pronatalist movement. Women should marry young and, stay close to home and have lots of kids. So that there certainly will be that kind of backlash as well. But I think, for women for whom this is a really, they're just looking at their own situation. Do they want to have kids? When does it make sense to do that? Hopefully that will sort of cut through and people will be able to, feel maybe a little bit more comfortable if this is a viable option for them.
Got it. Thank you, Pam, for joining us with this illuminating discussion. I'm looking forward to following your reporting further.
Thank you.
That's it for our show. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sarah Maslin Nir. If you've enjoyed these conversations and want to support more programs like this, please consider donating at the link on your screen. Thank you for watching.